We are extremely proud of the program because the International Studies degree, even though it's not a standalone degree, you can only do it when you're doing a vocational degree. It still opens doors by itself. As I say to the new students who come in each year, we have students who go and work for the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade and train to be diplomats. Attorney General's Department, we had a student go there. Immigration Department, NGOs, working for companies that want to hire students that have intercultural skills and things like that.
Employment is such a crucial part of every person's life, and yet a part that has undergone tremendous changes globally over the last few decades. The jobs we hold shape the life chances we have. They give us access to resources and rewards. They give us our dignity and are central to the very identity we subscribe to. The first seminar in this series looks at employment in Spain and Japan respectively, to reveal how looking for work affects young people in these two countries. It is presented by GEORGINA Stone and Anna Watanabe.
My actual research question was this: are the unemployed youth in Spain utilising their surplus of time to improve themselves with the aim of finding a job? So what were they doing to help them in the future? Obviously they can't find work now, but what were they doing to help them in the future in terms of building skills, building networks? So basically what I found, the biggest sort of difference in how someone that's unemployed utilises their time, one of the biggest differences is gender and age. So I found that the subjects that were slightly older, for example 23 years to 25, were more proactive in finding employment. They might have still been studying, but there was this sort of intensity to find a job and to find something. Their families were pushing them, their brothers, their sisters, their friends. What are you doing? Why aren't you working? Most of the subjects agreed that university studies it's the best way to spend time if you're unemployed, because it helps you find a job in the long run. You've got sort of a title with your name, you've got a degree to your name, you've demonstrated that you have skills appropriate to the career. And I found that a lot of youth in Spain at the moment are changing what they're studying to be more employable in the future. For example, people who studied arts or social arts degrees, art history, have changed direction completely. I had a subject that was doing art history and language and is now studying, or is now her second year of an engineering degree. Not because she has any interest in it whatsoever, but because she knows at this time in her country, people do not want an art historian, which is sad because they're losing sort of that little element in their society. But she's thinking of her future. What can she do? She has to change degree. Another sort of issue that was raised was, yes, university studies is a really good way to spend time, but at the moment, and in the crisis, university fees are becoming more and more expensive. Uni's becoming less accessible to people, and they're also getting rid of some of the scholarships. So on the one hand, it's the best way to utilise your time, but at the other hand, it's becoming too hard to sort of use your time this way.
Before we begin, there's a couple of words that are sort of essential to my report. The first is shūkatsu. Shūkatsu is a slang word that, not only young people, but everyone uses. It's combined of the two words underneath, which is shūshoku katsudo, and they take the first character from each. So it literally means a job hunting activity. But when you say shūkatsu, it kind of evokes these images of young people in suits. And this is something that I saw on maybe my first or second day at university. These are all fourth year students at the beginning of April who are still hunting for jobs. And if it's the beginning of April, it's at the end of the job hunting season. So these guys are really sort of clutching at straws here. But you can see everybody has dyed their hair black. Usually Japanese university students until their third year, not everyone, but a lot of people will have a lighter brown or a blonde rinse through their hair. So everyone redyes their hair black. they all wear these recruit suits. It's a specific suit. And when you say recruit suit, everyone knows what you're talking about. And they all have the same bags, the same shoes, everything. So yes, shukatsu is a very grueling word. So the title of my report is The Impact of Job Hunting on the Path to Adulthood. And in English, we have adult, and it sort of covers all manner of virtues and vices. But in Japan, it's difficult to translate adult in the terms that I've used it for my report. So one thing I did was I got my interviewees to sort of define in their own words what all these different words for adult were. The first one, otona, the characters literally mean big person. So this is a very rudimentary term. You know, when you buy a ticket in legal documents, you know, you're an otona. The next one down is seijin, and a seijin is someone who has come of age. So the picture on the right there is of a couple of my friends at their coming of age ceremony. They've just turned 20, so they're now allowed to drink, drive, vote, and all these sorts of things. So sort of this is a very traditional sense. They've become an adult, but the word seijin really only applies to people in that year when they're 20, and then after that there's something else. And then again there's shakaijin. You know, if you're an adult, does that make you a shakaijin? The really interesting thing that came up with all of my interviewees is that even though all of them were roughly my age, a couple of them were a bit older, because they were still students, they identified themselves as gakusei, which means student. They said they weren't adults, they were students. So this is the path to adulthood that a lot of, I think all of the literature that I came across sort of agreed upon. That is, you graduate from higher education. That can be anything, you know, a university, a trade, college, even high school. And then you enter the labour force, you leave the parental home, marry and become a parent. And in a lot of Western countries, this has become fairly flexible these days. A lot of people have children before marrying, or they'll have children while they're still studying, all sorts of things. But in Japan, this is still pretty much set in stone. And obviously there are exceptions to this, but it's a bit like, oh, did you hear about so-and-so? She had a baby and she's not married yet. Oh, you know, it's very... Japan is a society that I found really likes to do things the right way. So what happens when you don't get a full-time job during your shukatsu is you become a frita. And frita comes from the word fri Arbeiter. Arbeiter actually comes from German, which means arbeiten. But essentially it means someone who works as a part-time worker. And a frita, I studied fritas mainly through a media analysis of a television drama called Frita Ie o Kau, which means a frita buys a house. So there's sort of an irony in that, you know, this person without a full-time job buys a house. So already that from a media perspective, this person is achieving something almost impossible. And there is a fairly negative stereotype around fleeters. I found that people generally divided these fleeters into two groups. There are those who are forced into permanent part-time work because of whatever social situation they're in. But recently there's been a movement of people who choose to move into part-time work. They're kind of anti-salary men. They've seen their dads doing overtime and being tied to this company, and they want to follow maybe a more Western model, some could argue. The impact of job hunting in Japan it's huge compared to Australia. I feel like in Australia there's no job hunting. People want a job and they go on Seek or they'll chat to their friends and they'll find a job, whether it's the job that they want or the job that sort of gets them from A to B for the time being. It's not really an issue as such for university students. And it certainly doesn't impact us in terms of how we see ourselves as members of society or as adults. I'm sure that there would be graduates who don't find full-time work and go work at whatever part-time job that they've got that still feel that they contribute to society and are functioning adults just as much as their friends who do get a job somewhere else. And I also thought it was a little bit sad in a way that students my age were recognising this pressure, and I suppose they were thinking so far ahead in their life, this period of job hunting, when you're, say, 21, 22, essentially impacts what you'll be doing until you retire, which impacts what you'll be doing until you die. So there is this really long-term thinking process for everyone, and there's this pressure that if I don't get a job with Toyota or a reasonable company, how am I going to be looking after myself? And there is this real, there is a real fear of becoming a fleeter. I think fleeters are roughly a third of the working population in Japan. And with the financial crisis and things like that, companies have gradually been decreasing their job openings for graduates. So I think in 2010, there were about 100,000 more graduates who left university unemployed. A lot of students, they seem to really embrace their time as a student. And that was something that came up with a couple of my students. They actually use the term, when they're at university, they're on moratorium from life. So they're not adults and they're not children. They're kind of this gakusei stage of life where they don't have to do anything. To go into university, the test that high school students have to take is very rigorous. And then they get into university, and provided you show up to class, you'll pass, essentially. But, there are students who do very, very well and they try very hard. But I feel like in Australia, there's more expected of you on a sort of a weekly basis in terms of readings and things like that. So yeah, students, they wouldn't go on the streets and drink, but everyone would find the 24-hour karaoke bar and just do that because they could. And there was this consciousness that if they don't do it now, when they are students, they won't be able to do it when they get a job. Kind of like the travelling thing, students go travelling because they don't want the regret later on in life. So yeah, that was similar, but everything else I think is completely different. It's a fairly high percentage.
Very high, very near to the US situation. And then even the high school leaver, they will go to the 2 years college or the technical college. So all in all, 80% of the population will go to some tertiary education. So the rest of the 20%, they're hung out somewhere, or that they will go into the public service and so on.